Allô, allô. C'est bon, ça marche. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. We're here to present you some thinking, findings, and recommendation regarding scaling up PPP, EMR projects in the Caribbean. So just quickly, who are we? We are a law firm. And I think that we are the only legal people around here presenting something. So we're very thankful for this invitation by Sabrina. Thank you very much, Sabrina. And just remind a little bit that lawyers is like American Express. You know, you cannot live without it. Otherwise, you're going to run into trouble. And it's very interesting because in terms of regulation, we hear around, you know, I've been here day one, and everybody's like complaining about regulation, about authorization, permits, everything's very lengthy. But experience and lesson learned tell us that you can run into big litigation and complex indemnification if the legal framework and the contractual setting is not proper. So we are a small firm with 18 years of experience, and we are advising public authorities as well as private sector and notably developers. Recently, we have been completed some interesting project concerning the legal feasibility of tidal and wave energy project potential in the Eastern Caribbean, which is what Judith just presented with the 14 Eastern Caribbean territories. We also worked on the SWAC feasibility project, which is seawater air conditioning, for which the former presentation raised the potential and interest in the Eastern Caribbean and the whole Caribbean zone, especially on the hotels, hospitals, and ports. So what we advising is on the legal and institutional framework, the eligibility and selection criteria for private operators under PPP format and procurement procedures, the adaptation of legislative and regulatory framework, and the drafting of model and agreements like PPP, concession agreements, as well as PPA. We focusing on governance and inclusion, and are specializing capacity building and knowledge transfer. So this is our reference in the Latin American Caribbean region, where you can see that we are very familiar with the legal landscape of this region, and having worked with a lot of public institutions and public donors. So just a quick overview. So I know that, you know, lawyers are always already, you know, the ones who are like criticizing, you know, everything, and we're trying to, there's a real potential. We all recognize it, but we have major constraints. And from the legal perspective, first of all, this is all this renewable marine energy sector. It's an emerging sector, it's a new sector. Therefore, the regulation, you know, is always post ante. So you cannot anticipate what should be regulated before actually practicing it and trying to get out, you know, point out and identify the loopholes, the gaps, and the constraint in the sector. The lack of harmonization of laws and regulations, especially because in the area it's you have a small territories, and this is important that we have like a coherent, harmonized legal framework in order to implement these projects, especially because cross-border projects and regional projects. Mind you, a lot of countries in the Caribbean ratify the treaties because they have to, because the donors require it, because the investors require it, because the banks are requiring that there's some kind of compliance with international treaty. However, there's a lack of application decree, application law, so the trickle down of all these big principles, it's not working very well. And this is a lack here. You have a lot of agencies, a lot of institutions. They overlapping sometimes in terms of competences, and this is very difficult to understand who is doing what, who is deciding what, and who is trying to resolve some issues. Contractual arrangement. The contractual setting is very important, and there's a lack of capacity and resources to understand, to comprehend it, and negotiate with private sector those contracts. The cross-border project issue, which is very interesting and very constraining in the sense that the special economic zone and the 200 nautic miles, it's not, we can reach a lot of islands. You know, we're talking about Antigua. I'm originally from Guadeloupe, and I can see Guadeloupe from, you know, my hometown. Okay, so the 325 kilometers, it's where, you know, I can reach. So there's definitely some, you know, issues and coordination and negotiation to be taking place in upstream, you know, before launching this kind of, you know, projects. Funding gaps. This is really an important issue. There is, how do you say, there's, I think there's a bond, a blue bond emission recently by CAF, the Development Caribbean Bank, for 100 million euros. But still, we need some blended mechanism whereby you can try to include citizen shareholding, participation in the project, in a project company. And I think that this is one of the persistent and very important issue. Lack of data. I mean, if you look at all the website and the platform on the internet, every single time they talk about the Caribbean, they talk about Haiti, Jamaica, and you know, and the other islands are not treated as well. Okay, so Saint Lucia, Trinidad, or you know, other islands are not. We don't have any data, concise data on what is the state of, you know, in the energy sector or otherwise. So just to give you a little idea of what we're doing and what we look at in legal, you know, and feasibility. By the way, before we talk about, you know, feasibility study, and we talk about technical, environmental, financial, legal is important. The legal feasibility is basically the one which, how do you say, that you deal with after all the feasibility studies have been done. Because we like a conductor, okay? We're wrapping it up. So either the law is not consistent, the project is not compliant with the law, therefore you have to arrange a law, or, you know, you trying to find another, you know, like alternative. But basically you see there's a myriad of laws and regulations which apply to any specific project in in renewable energy sector, maritime sector. Stakeholders too. Okay, so you have the public side on on one side, and on the others you have the civil society shareholders. So all these stakeholders have to be consulted, or you ought to understand what are the expectations and how we can reconcile and get some common ground to build up and develop and implement a project. Our legal due diligence, what we're looking for, just to give you a little reminder, is it a bundle or unbundled system? Do you allow IPPs or not? Who is controlling the distribution? Who is controlling, the energy production? Who is controlling the sale? Who's controlling the tariffs? So all this is something that the legal, analysis will give you. Is it a renewable energy framework, specific framework dedicated to the development of these energies? The environmental and social, sometimes is lacking, sometimes is very, there are not a lot of rules and provision. PPPs, of course, private sector involvement require a concise and proper PPP legal framework. The contractual setting, this is something which happens after the feasibility study and the legal feasibility. Who's going to be in there, for how long, what could be the role of this project company, sorry. And the specific issue here that we try to tackle is the citizen and the private person trying to, subscribe to and take a share and a stake in the project company. Last but not least, one of the key contractual document in this project is the PPA, so the power purchase agreement, and all the guarantees that you provide, by the parties, the purchaser and the seller. Oh, okay, so that was, okay. Energy project. Just to give you a little bit, of ideas of who is whom. And you see that under PPP schemes, so you have the public actors on one side, and you have the private sector. Sometimes you have multiple shareholding from the public actors and from the investors and the lenders. And the power purchase agreement is the one which is, leading to the viability and the sustainability of your project. And you can see too, just to be aware of, that that's around 40 to 50 contracts to be concluded. So emerging norms, you have new, as was raised before, you have new initiatives by several donors, OECS, that was described in details before. You have all these agencies from Europe, which are, developing principles governing blue bonds and blue finance, blue economy finance. You have also the EU enacting directives and recommending principles on the blue economy, and especially focusing on the social inclusion in the blue economy. You have a new concept that we're trying to look for it, and I think that a lot of developers are interested in it too. It's what we call biodiversity credits. So as, not opposed, but, like the carbon credit, and which could gain when you provide some measure protecting the biodiversity while developing those renewable energy projects. And last but not least, social inclusive criteria which is increasingly included in procurement policies. Now I'm going to pass to my partner, Karim.
Thank you. We're going to briefly describe an initiative we're trying to launch in the region. Based on our experience, there is a major inter-island communication problem. There are many reasons for that. Well, obviously, physical reasons, linguistic reasons. Still, there is a lack of circulation of models across island, which is striking. So, our objective is to study local governance models in particular, okay, and to identify the type of resources that are needed but are not achievable at the level of one island, and see what can be pulled regionally. That's our objective. So the context is quite straightforward, in fact. Sustainable development issues require a type of management, collective management, that is developed here and there in the Caribbean, but not necessarily harmonized, which hampers communication. And also, there is no real comparison of models. There is no real comparison of models in the sense that the best models, in our opinion, which we found somewhere, are never copied elsewhere because they're simply unknown. So, we have somehow to find ways to enhance interaction across islands, okay? And one of the problems we face today has to do with the fact that local authorities tend to favor traditional institutional treaties across islands, which is extremely slow and extremely tedious in practice. In fact, as all of you who are involved in that type of endeavors know, this is not feasible to address short and medium-term issues. To do that, we need in parallel to develop some kind of agile cooperation mechanisms, which are not necessarily hard institutional law. This could be soft law. We just need to find the right channels to make them circulate. If they're good enough, the viral effect will be enough to disseminate them across the Caribbean. So, as I said, the ultimate objective of this project is first to identify the best models, and second, to identify the type of resource that could be pulled so that the most complex models become achievable for every single island. We will disseminate the models through both channels. Okay? The first being contamination. It could be, for example, governance model for citizen participation. Okay? All the inclusive models that we have seen in the Caribbean are interested, but they have never been compared. They have never been benchmarked, and this is one thing we want to do. Then we will find ways to put these people in touch. The second thing is the use of expertise to increase the level of project we can achieve so that a whole new range of projects become achievable at the local level. We envision three steps. Okay, the first, obviously, is identification of best practices locally, then identification of shortages of expertise. Monique just described a PPP. Obviously, a PPP is out of reach for a number of islands. It's out of reach because they simply don't have the proper technical resources. I'm talking about, if you leave aside all the technical resources related to energy projects, they don't have the legal resources, they don't have the financial expertise to address these kind of projects. So the idea is to identify precisely, based on the type of project we want to develop, the type of resources we need to pool. Then, based on that, based on our assumption, we will organize workshops. The first to prioritize best practice, what is to be disseminated and shared, and what type of expertise is to be pooled. Okay? Once we have agreed with the relevant stakeholders, we will organize training workshop to actually give them the elements of the information about what is to be done. And the final step will be a series of pilot projects which we are going to develop. We see different projects to see which one works, so to compare projects, but also similar projects to compare islands, to compare the local environment across islands. Okay? And then, of course, the setting up of a regional PPP unit that will have the expertise available to move to the more complex projects and ideally regional projects, which are by far the most complex legally when you talk PPP. Thank you very much.
To be short, just disposing because we don't want to be too technical, but so we can answer questions. Obviously, the legal matter is, I'm not saying out of reach, maybe technical too, but I think that there is several things that should be discussed, especially and what's interesting for us is the multi-usage that you can have of energy sources. And I think that I want to ask my friend here, André Charles, who is specializing in seawater air conditioning. And I think there's interesting things that could be tackled too, and that, that needs and require some, legal issues, regulatory issues, contractual issues, and that interesting. So please, André Charles.
Thank you, Monique. Thanks. Sometimes we are a developer for SWAG technology, and sometimes we get some private clients for SWAG and to give air conditioning to this kind of hotel, and we made a PPA. But sometimes with the new technology, it's really expensive. And our idea is develop with the private client an installation. But the issue we got in after do this, how we can arrange another contract, maybe a PPA with a legal entity of the government in order to increase the network on the installation for doing district cooling.
Yeah, that's interesting because, see, when we talk about PPP, the PPP might not be where you think it is, okay? So when you're dealing with hotels, for instance, it's a private ownership, it's a private company. So the developer is going to enter a PPA, okay, power purchase agreement, but it's private with private. So it's not a PPP. PPP is with the public sector, right? Public service, public investment, public support, guarantee, and so on and so forth. What André Charles raised, which is a very interesting question, is you can use a PPA or project with a private company, and the reminder of, the volume of the energy that you have can be dispatched and can benefit the school nearby, the public building nearby, and so you have multi-usage, which could be then a PPP. Okay? And the other thing too is what I understood is that somehow in this SWAC technology, and I'm not advocating for any technology, we're neutral, technology neutral as lawyer, but that's an interesting view, and maybe in other sector, I mean, you know, like renewable energy sector, you can do it too, is the reuse of the energy provided that are not, how do you say, exhausted, that you can reuse it to do something that can protect, for instance, biodiversity. And so I think that these, you know, from a legal perspective, is very interesting. But you understand that when we talk about emerging sector, it's like you have a lot of alternatives that are not contemplated by the regulator right now because it doesn't exist. So you have to build up on the practice, you know, those kind of contracts. So I thought it was a very interesting thing to say, you know, raise at this moment. So is there no other questions? I think that, you know, I think we have a meeting later on. But thank you, everybody. And by the way, if you want to know where, you know, I took this picture, that was in Dominica. So next door to Guadeloupe, where I'm from. Thank you very much.